The Forgotten Below Gospel of the Forgotten Sky Scroll Y. The Descent Preserved Fragment, Codex Sigma Ash. Translated by Archive Node 12 under Project Echo Sarn Origin. Authorship attributed to Anahel. Designation unknown. We came not in fire, but in silence. The stars behind us wept light, a final farewell from the dead cities we abandoned. Earth was still wounded when we returned, quiet, steaming, blooming with new green. Time had forgotten us. The world had moved on, but we remembered everything. They speak of us now as myths, watchers in the sky, messengers with wings of flame. But we were no more divine than the medals we wore, or the vessels we descended in. We were scientists, soldiers, dreamers, chosen not for holiness, but for survival. We did not descend as gods. We landed as orphans. The Ark, what they call the Ark, was not a ship of wood, but a vault of memory. Its hull once shone with starlight, forged in the orbit of the dying moon. Inside were the seeds of Earth, life coated in crystalline strands, slumbering in perfect stillness. 2 of every beast, yes, but not of flesh, of data, of preserved essence. We carried them in light, and we carried our failure. The world that birthed us fell to ruin by our own hands. Towers of thought became weapons. Algorithms turned against will. The oceans boiled with consequence, and the sky turned black, not from judgment, but from smoke. So we fled. We waited. We returned. The first of us to emerge walked the broken land and were mistaken for angels. One healed a child's blindness with a field implant in his palm. Another revived a dying crop with nanoseeds in her breath. Miracles, they called them. But the truth is colder. They were remnants of tools we no longer understood. We were worshipped. We were feared. One among us, Kalas, the silver-voiced, warned, "If we allow them to kneel, they will never rise." But the others, older, tired, let it happen. We were weary of war, and their prayers were gentler than bullets. That was the first sin, not arrogance, not power, but silence. We let them believe, and so they built temples in our names. Scroll 2, The Seeds of Power. Preserved fragment, Codex Sigma Ash. Extracts from the Field Journal of Anahel. First contact with the Dusklanders. The first day we met them, they were not our children, but our children's children. When the Ark touched ground, we thought the land was barren, silent, forgotten. But beneath the soil, in caverns deep and forgotten, something had survived. The Dusklanders, they called themselves, though we would learn this name was as incomplete as their history. We found them in the Shadow Grove, as the sun was bleeding into the horizon. They had not seen light for many generations. Beneath the veil of their pale skin, the heavy darkness of the forgotten earth had left its mark. Their eyes were wide and unblinking, adapted to an age of eternal dusk. They were not afraid. In the hours that followed, they observed us, silent, unreadable, until they came forward. They were not the saviors we had hoped to meet, nor the enemies we feared. They were a reflection of what we had become. Anahel spoke first. And like all first words, they were the wrong ones. "I bring you the light," I said. A voice replied from the shadows. "Light?" The voice came from a small figure, hardly more than a child. "Is it not the sun that burns?" It was a question of innocence, of misunderstanding. The first rupture between us. We had thought they were the descendants of those who had survived, those who had learned from the mistakes of their forebears. Instead, we learned they were not survivors. They were the forgotten ones, those who had been abandoned before the Ark. And yet, in them I saw something we had lost, the willingness to live without the weight of our failures. They had not been burdened by the fire of knowledge. They had not destroyed their world. They were born from the earth itself, pure, untainted. The next morning they welcomed us as they had welcomed no others before. "You are the ones who came in the light," they said. "You must show us what it means to burn." I did not understand, but I felt it then, a strange pulse within my chest, the echo of a memory long forgotten. The fire that had burned us, the very thing we feared, the thing we buried within the ark, was the thing they would call salvation. They spoke of the flame of the old gods, the light that had once burned across the earth, spreading knowledge, burning away ignorance. They did not fear the fire. They worshipped it. The ark's true purpose was not just to carry life, it was to rekindle the flame. And so, we began. We began to teach them. We began to light the flame anew. But the Dusklanders did not learn as we had hoped. The fire we brought was not just the gift of knowledge, but of destruction. Their old ways, of living in shadows, of silence, had served them well. And now, the flame threatened to burn everything they had come to cherish. Scroll the 3. The Ashen Divide, also known as the Breach of Flame and Flesh. When fire cleaved the sky, the old gods wept not for the dying, but for those who survived. For survival without unity is but a slower kind of death. Fragment from the Whispered Codex, line 17. The days following the rekindling of the flame were heavy with silence. The Arkborn, weary travelers of celestial stone, had expected reverence, worship even, from those they once left behind. Instead, they were met with wary eyes and clenched fists. The Dusklanders did not bow. They stood in scattered ranks, their dark eyes glowing faintly beneath ash-veiled skies. They had endured their own apocalypse and shaped a culture of survival not from reverence, but from remembrance. The gods who fled were no longer gods to them. At the heart of the Ashen Plains, near the ruins of the world's spine, a gathering was called. Leaders of both bloodlines stood face to face. Arius, flame-bearer of the Ark, and Vasa, bone-teller of the dusk. Their words were not swords, but they cut all the same. "You speak of light as if it has not blinded you," Vasa said. "You left this world scorched and returned expecting a throne. The earth no longer remembers your name." Arius did not raise his voice. He simply held up the relic they had uncovered deep in the flame vaults, a blackened orb that pulsed with ancient resonance. "This is not a memory. It is truth. Your ancestors knew it. We did not abandon. We escaped, and we came back for you." But the orb did not speak to the Dusklanders. Its song was for the sky-born only, and so the first breach was not made by sword or flame, but by silence and disbelief. In the days that followed, some among the Dusklanders began to splinter. A few followed Arius and the Ark Flame, drawn by ancient dreams that echoed in sleep. Others, more faithful to the earth, cast their bones into the fire and read rebellion in the smoke. Thus, the Ashen Divide was born, not of war, but of vision. Two peoples, one scarred world, and a growing wound between them. And in the deep dark, beyond what the flame could touch, something else watched. Something older than gods, older even than the Ark. Scroll 4. The Veil of Cinder, also known as the Withdrawing of Flame. Sometimes gods must become ghosts if the world is to breathe on its own, etched on the back wall of the hollow temple, buried under sand and time. The breach widened, not with fire, but with fear. Among the Arkborn, a question arose, quiet at first, then deafening. What if we are not saviors? The flame they carried, once thought to be a gift, had become a point of division. Their presence sowed unrest, Factions splintered. Cities turned inward, bracing for a war that had not yet begun. Arius, once filled with conviction, now stood sleepless before the council fire, his hands scorched by the relic orb's pulse. Vasa had retreated into the ruins with her bone tellers, her final words lingering. You returned too late, or too early. Either way, not right. And in secret, strange signs began appearing. Humans unaffected by the flame who nevertheless dreamed in tongues of the old world. Some carved runes they had never learned. Others wept in sleep, whispering names from the Ark's sealed archives. The Arkborn realized a truth they had never considered. The world was evolving without them, and they had brought a war of identity merely by existing. So the choice was made. They would withdraw, not in defeat, but in hope. They built sanctuaries in forgotten places, beneath collapsed cities, within hollow mountains, across distant islands shrouded by storm and illusion. They erased traces of their cities. The relics were scattered, sealed, and bound with rites even they barely understood. We must not lead, Arius declared in his final address, until we are no longer mistaken for masters. And so, with the last flare of the flame tower, fading into dusk, the Arkborn became legend once more, and humanity was left with ruins, relics, and dreams that would outlive history.